I remember a time when my family was a home, not a stage. I was just the understudy, the quiet one with the long, dark hair that everyone said was my best feature. It was the one thing they couldn't take from me. Or so I thought. We were always told family is everything. But in my world, it felt more like a competition. Every success I had, every little bit of light that shined on me, seemed to dim the spotlight on my sister. So they found a way to put me back in the shadows. On the night before the biggest day of her life, they thought by taking a piece of me, they'd make me less. But what they didn't know was that they didn't take anything at all. They just showed me what I was really made of. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. I used to count the cracks in the ceiling, each one a year I had lived in that house, a ghost in my own home. I was used to being invisible, to words that passed right through me, to smiles meant for someone else. My long, dark brown hair, which reached my waist, was the only thing that felt truly mine. A small flicker of light in a dim room. My family never really saw Eleanor. They only saw Olivia, my twin sister, radiant and always the center of attention. My name was often mistaken for hers, or simply ignored. Once, at a family gathering, a friend of my parents came up to me and asked, "How have you been, Olivia?" before immediately turning to my sister, as if I were just an accessory. Olivia, with her familiar smile, never corrected them, and I just stood there in silence. The pain didn't come from a stranger's indifference, but from my family's quiet agreement. Tonight, while preparing for Olivia's wedding, my mother, Susan, invited a friend over to discuss the interior design. I had spent months sketching the most beautiful drawings for Olivia's bridal suite, hoping it would be a way to finally be seen. But when her friend asked, "Who had such a wonderful idea?" my mother pointed to Olivia, saying proudly, "That's my girl, a born talent." Olivia smiled, never correcting her, standing there. I felt the betrayal seep into every cell of my body. It became even more painful when I overheard my mother on the phone. "Eleanor, she's busy with Olivia's wedding, but I don't think she'll ever find anyone. You know, she's too busy to bother anyone." The voice wasn't malicious, just pitying and sarcastic, a quiet condemnation that I would always be a failure. The pain was like an invisible knife, cutting deeper than any words could. It made me realize this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a cruel truth, and everything was about to change. I remember the day my parents looked at me, and for a fleeting moment, I felt seen. It was my 11th birthday, and I had just finished my first art class. I was so proud of the abstract painting I had created, a canvas of vibrant chaos that mirrored the jumble of ideas in my head. My mother, Susan, hung it in the hallway, right next to Olivia's perfect, neat drawing of a house with a smiling sun. For a week, it stayed there, a silent challenge to my sister's perfection. Then, one day, I came home from school and it was gone, replaced by another of Olivia's drawings. This one of a little girl in a pink dress, her face round and innocent. It's just not as clean. "Eleanor," my mother had said, her voice soft and apologetic, as if she were excusing my very existence. That was the first time I truly understood my place in the family. I was the understudy, the supporting role, the girl with the long, dark hair that was only ever acknowledged as pretty to highlight my sister's stunning blonde locks. My name is Eleanor, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been a silent negotiation with my family's expectations. My sister Olivia was the family star, the golden child. Her accomplishments were celebrated, her failures excused, and her every whim was met with an unwavering devotion from our parents. I was simply the one in the background, the one who handled the logistics, who made things happen without ever getting the credit. It was a role I fell into naturally, as if it were a costume I was born to wear. My long, dark hair became a sort of armor, a part of my identity that was so uniquely mine. It felt untouchable. It was the only thing they never commented on, the one part of me that was not up for comparison. The news of Olivia's engagement felt less like a celebration and more like a theatrical performance. With me in a leading role, I never auditioned for. "We need your help with the wedding, Eleanor," my mother had said, her voice filled with a saccharine sweetness that I had learned to distrust. "You're so good with details." And so, I became the silent engine of the wedding planning. I spent countless nights meticulously crafting the digital invitation, designing the elegant wedding website that featured a beautiful photo of Olivia and her fiancé, and creating a detailed timeline of events that would ensure everything ran smoothly. It was my way of contributing, a desperate, silent plea for recognition. My work was always met with a polite nod, a cursory glance before being passed to Olivia for her final approval. There was a moment I will never forget. I had just finished the mock-up for the table settings, a subtle design that mirrored the intricate lace on Olivia's wedding dress. My father, with a genuine warm smile, had looked at it and said, "This is beautiful. Eleanor." For a moment, I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in years, hate. But the moment was shattered when my mother walked in, snatched the mock-up from his hands, and said with a condescending chuckle, "Oh, look what Eleanor has come up with. It's so you, dear." She then turned to Olivia and said, "Don't worry, sweetie, we'll get the final design approved by the wedding planner. This is just for fun." The words were like a physical blow, a reminder that my efforts, my talent, my very existence were just for fun, a temporary diversion from the real world where Olivia was the star. The days leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of last-minute preparations, each one feeling like a deliberate act of erasure. My mother had a habit of calling me Olivia to strangers, then laughing it off as a joke. I would stand there, my hands tied, forced to smile and pretend I didn't just feel my soul shrink. The final week, a friend of Olivia's, a kind girl named Sarah, had found the wedding website I had created. She posted a glowing review on social media, praising my incredible talent and unwavering dedication. The next day, the post was gone. I knew who had taken it down. It was a small act, but it was a clear message. They didn't want my talent to be seen. They didn't want me to be seen. The night before the wedding, I was exhausted. I had spent the entire day running errands, fixing last-minute details, and enduring a constant barrage of condescending remarks about my lack of a social life. My mother had even said to me, with a feigned sigh, "You're so lucky you can focus on these things. Eleanor, Olivia has a life to live." I went to bed early, my heart heavy, my mind a storm of silent resentments. I fell into a deep sleep, a sleep of sheer mental and physical exhaustion. The chill that ran through my veins wasn't from the air conditioning. It was a cold, empty dread that woke me from a deep, dreamless sleep. My head felt light, unnaturally so. I reached up, my fingers meeting not the familiar cascade of long, dark hair, but jagged, uneven stubble. A gasp caught in my throat, but no sound came out. The room was dark, but a sliver of moonlight from the window was enough to illuminate the horror I felt as my trembling fingers traced the mangled remains of what had been my pride. It was as if a piece of me had been ripped away, leaving a raw, exposed wound. I stumbled out of bed, a frantic, silent panic building in my chest. The bathroom light seared my eyes as I faced the mirror, and a stranger stared back. My hair, once a symbol of my quiet strength and my one true constant, was gone, replaced by a grotesque, lopsided mop. I saw a hint of red at the roots, the color of a cheap box dye, and I knew instantly this wasn't a mistake, it was an act of brutal, calculated humiliation. Downstairs, the house was eerily calm, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. My parents sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, the picture of domestic tranquility. My mother, Susan, saw me first. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face, a look of smug satisfaction that made my stomach clench. "Morning, dear," she said, her voice dripping with an insincere sweetness. "Slept well?" I could only stand there, my hands balled into fists, the cold rage of betrayal replacing the fear. My father, Edward, looked up from his newspaper, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, uncomfortable second before he looked away, a silent accomplice in this crime. "It was for the best. Eleanor," my mother continued, her voice hardening slightly. "You know, for the wedding pictures. Olivia's day is about her. You wouldn't want to steal her thunder, would you?" The words hung in the air. A final, cruel justification, and they didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as a rival, a threat to their golden child's carefully curated image. They thought they had broken me, reduced me to a cowering, humiliated girl who would hide in shame. But in that moment, something shifted. The fear and sadness gave way to an icy resolve, a quiet fury that was more dangerous than any scream. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I just turned, walked back upstairs, and closed my bedroom door with a quiet finality that was louder than any shout. The mirror in my room reflected not a victim, but a survivor. I found my own pair of professional shears, the ones I used for my design projects. And with a steady hand, I began to fix their mess. The snip of the blades was a rhythmic, liberating sound. I didn't just trim it, I sculpted it. I created a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed my face with a fierce, modern elegance. It was a statement. It was a reclamation. I looked at my reflection, and for the first time, I saw the true Eleanor unapologetically bold, independent, and free. My hair, once a passive symbol of my patience, was now a powerful emblem of my defiance. I took the emerald green silk dress from my closet, the one they had told me was too dramatic, and put it on. It was a deep, rich color that contrasted sharply with the soft pastels of the wedding color palette. I was not just a guest at this wedding. I was a new woman, attending my own revolution. My entrance to the wedding was a silent, slow-motion movie. The venue was breathtaking, a lush garden filled with white roses and soft, flowing fabric. Olivia looked radiant in her dress, a perfect vision of a bride. But as I walked in, a ripple went through the crowd, heads turned, whispers started. They were expecting the timid, long-haired Eleanor, the girl they could pity. Instead, they saw a woman with a sharp, chic hairstyle and a dress that commanded attention. I held my head high, my expression serene, a knowing smile on my lips. My mother's face, a mask of smug satisfaction just hours before, paled slightly. Olivia's perfectly rehearsed smile faltered for a second, a flicker of unease in her eyes. I didn't approach them. I stayed on the periphery, a silent, powerful observer. My presence was an act of rebellion, a silent promise that their cruelty would not go unpunished. The moment of truth came during the reception. The photographer, A kind woman I had worked with on the wedding website had prepared a special surprise. "A little slideshow of Olivia's life," she announced, her voice filled with warmth. The music began, and a series of photographs of Olivia from childhood to adulthood flashed on the big screen. The guests cooed and clapped, but then the images began to change. I had secretly provided the photographer with my own collection of photos, and as the music swelled, images of my life started to appear. A picture of me as a teenager, clutching my first portfolio of graphic design work, a shot of me smiling proudly next to a finished client project, a photo of me in my graduation cap and gown. Each image was a silent testament to a life they had systematically ignored, a story they had tried to erase. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, turning from polite applause to genuine intrigue. My parents, who had seen these photos before, now looked at them as if for the first time, their faces a mixture of confusion and panic. The climax arrived with a soft fade. The last slide appeared on the screen, a beautiful, high-quality shot of me from just before the ceremony, in my emerald green dress, my new short hair catching the light. I was not hiding in the shadows. I was standing in the center, my face a picture of serene confidence. The crowd erupted in applause, and a woman I had never met before turned to my mother, a look of genuine admiration in her eyes, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "That hairstyle is simply divine. Where did Eleanor get it done?" The question hung in the air, a simple, innocent question that was a devastating blow. My mother's face was a study in pure shock and utter defeat. She had no answer. She had no narrative. She had lost control of the story she had worked so hard to write. I didn't need to say a single word. My quiet existence had just become a statement, and my revenge was complete. I simply smiled, a genuine, joyful smile, knowing that they would have to live with the truth they had tried so hard to hide. My victory was not in their humiliation, but in my own liberation. I had found my voice, and it was the sound of silence. After the unmasking at the party, I left without a word. I didn't need an apology or an explanation. My revenge wasn't about ruining their happiness, but about building my own. I found a new group of friends, people who value me for who I am and for my talents. My life is no longer a stage, it's a painting, and I'm the only artist. I learned a valuable lesson: family isn't always defined by blood. It's defined by respect, honesty, and support. They tried to steal my light, but all they did was help me find my true strength. They thought that by cutting my hair, they could cut my confidence, but they were wrong. I didn't go back, didn't text, and didn't seek reconciliation. The truth about my family's actions remains, an indelible stain. But the most important thing is that I found peace and happiness, something they tried to steal but ultimately could never reach.